To open the conference's proceedings, we have Sean, who's the head of AI at Bio, and he's been really spearheading the whole hackathon and has kind of been leading that charge. So yeah, we'll have him open up the conference. Woo! Take that one, yeah.
Awesome, thank you, Ella. My name's Sean Brennan. I'm the head of AI at Bio, and I've joined Bio in December, and we're building out a team. We're now up to 7 people on the AI team, and we're growing basically what it means. And so today, I just want to talk about like kind of the Web 2 space, do a little survey of what's happening in the world of AI back in Silicon Valley, SF, and then we'll talk about what Bio's doing to put AI on chain. And so one of the themes that we've seen is that with how easy it is to launch agents, many scientists can start to use agents either as a research assistant, or something that we want to do is actually train these agents to learn from the private notes, the private emails. Like basically they can learn the secret sauce of any scientist. And so we'll talk about that today. So there's kind of like 3 different things that we're talking about here. There's science, there's AI, and blockchain. And yesterday we were mainly talking about blockchain and science, and now we bring in a third part, which is AI. And there's, in the past, even last year or so, because the foundational models are getting so much better, and because people are starting to test out what they can do around the different parts of the experimental process, let's talk through about 7 different Web 2 versions of AI, and then we'll talk about BioAgents. So here's an interesting quote from Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, where he says, "We expect the impact of AGI to be uneven. Although some industry will change a little, scientific progress will likely be much faster than it is today. This impact will surpass everything else we do." Which, it's pretty crazy. Like OpenAI is now one of the fastest growing companies in the world, and like what they see internally is that their models are getting better and better at science, and once like there's basically 2 different scenarios. Either there's a breakaway exponential growth or a logarithmic growth in what these AIs are able to do as far as training these models. And so in either case, either it's exponential, they get smarter exponentially, where that's one scenario. I think it's a little more likely that we start to reach logarithm returns on how quickly these models increase, in which case, for every GPU, it's that incremental increase. You can either run it for training new models, or you can run it for running agents. And like once these agents with these foundational models are getting so smart, I think a lot more compute will be turned towards the different problems of the world, and turning basically, it's almost like the SETI Space Telescope or the Hubble telescope, where you have these amazing giant compute clusters that you can point to any problem you want, and pointing them towards science is what we'll see today. These are the 7 ones I'll briefly go over from Google. Some of these are closed source, specifically Google, OpenAI, and the Microsoft one's not out yet. The others are all open source. And so we're really, at Bio, we have a smaller team than these large companies, and so building on open source is really important to us, where we can take the best of what's out there and build upon it and add our own ideas and add on-chain parts to it. So with Google, it's a hypothesis generator. This is just a slide from their paper. They have multiple agents working under the hood to propose ideas, and then they have this pipeline where out of all the different ideas, they are put like head-to-head, almost like a competition. And it actually is a competition where each idea, could be hundreds of thousands, is put against another, and over time the hypotheses are ranked, and so you get the best ideas. It's just basically a leaderboard of ideas, and people can read them and be like, hey, that's a really good idea, we should keep going with that, create an experiment plan, and actually test it. Sakana is an open source project out of Japan, where it is a similar idea. It's checking whether things are novel, scoring them, and creating a research agenda. And one interesting thing about this is that something called ablation studies, where it's a term from neural networks, where if you have an output and you remove one node of that process, how does the output change? And so you can see in these neural networks how a particular node affects the outcome. And they actually do this for science as well, where you can train an AI and test it based on this, and then basically you remove one idea from it and see how that changes the output. And you can see how basically the tree of knowledge affects the knowledge coming after it, which is put out here. Preliminary investigation, they tune these hyperparameters and then create a research agenda, and then study how changing different parts of that tree change the outcome. Really cool. Something that came out yesterday, OpenAI O3 Pro. Anyone here use O3 on a daily basis? Here's a show of hands. Daily basis, every day. That's a lot of people. And so you might have heard that this one that came out yesterday is much better than what you guys have been using. This is a few charts of, it's called the 404 reliability, where it has even better responses sometimes for one shot, but then this is a chart of showing its results based on, is it going for 404? So like a 300-point upgrade in coding, much better at math, and it's only a little bit better at science than O1 Pro, but it's getting much better. And what's crazy about these models is that they run for a long time. This is from O3 Pro, where it's starting to be either in coding or certain with science, where I used to work in a lab where we'd basically run a centrifuge overnight, and you'd go out home for the day at 5, you start a centrifuge, and then come back in the morning. And something like that is possible in science, where you can give these long-running tasks to AI and come back in the morning and see that it made progress towards the problem that you're researching. So it's a new way to use AIs, for sure. Here is a new project out of a lab at Stanford called BioAgent. Really cool. The URL is biomni.stanford.edu if you want to check it out. This one is especially interesting because they train on 105 different biomedical kind of lab bench softwares, as well as databases and biological specialized tools. And so out of the gate, any lab could use this, and it helps postdocs with specific ideation around what genetic sequences to use for a specific experiment, and it's able to help at a level much greater than O3 or a non-scientific AI, because it's trained in all these things and can help with this entire set of features, disciplines of science. And this one just came out a few days ago. It was open sourced, and so here's what it looks like more with the reasoning loop. There's an observation it makes, and then it reasons more, and it's just the sequence of reasoning and observations that progress, and it's meant to be chatted with. One way to use these AIs is more autonomously, where it's just running different steps of the scientific process in sequence, or you can have it where it's chatted with, and the hypotheses it generates are actually initiated by the user, where you give it some initial conditions or initial question and go from there, instead of the Google co-scientist, which is fully autonomous. Two more to go through. Future House is incredible. They're really state of the art as far as open source. They're a lab out of SF, and they're doing amazing progress for turning agents towards hypothesis generation. They name them after birds. They each have a different purpose and different specificity. And so it's really there's just a target disease name, something that you're working on. It has a system where it's generating hypotheses and actually can send in vitro requests to labs, in vivo, in silico, so whatever laboratory experiment is appropriate, it can do that, gets the experiment back, experimental results back, performs statistical analysis, sees whether there's a result worth publishing or no result, and has an output of therapeutic candidates. So basically really incredible stuff. And here is one specific example that they have from their paper. The idea was to fix dry, age-related macular degeneration. It picked a certain assay to test it. It found specific chemicals, drug candidates from that, and created a therapeutic candidate, and then tested those in vitro. So honestly, this is like world-changing stuff, where once this becomes more widespread, a lot more labs are not going to be gated by their ideas and not going to be gated by time, because you can, as long as you have some funding, like these are, in a sense, like micro-experiments, where as long as you have some funding for this purpose, then you can build up results and publish a paper. One other thing to note from them just came out last week. It's a scientific reasoning model called Ether0, not related to Ethereum, but it's able to, it's not for chatting with, it's basically accepting it needs specific chemistry problems, and it outputs basically a response of how the chemical reaction will go. And this is an example from the paper where this is 3 different problems, and then the bottom one is like when it's more trained. But something interesting is that within different training runs, it actually invented names for chemicals it saw often, or molecules it saw often. So this thing called reductamol is a term invented by the agent, and it basically it saw it commonly enough where it felt it deserved a name and invented something, and now it's probably going to become part of the scientific text. One note, just also from 2 weeks ago, Microsoft is paying attention to this space. This is from their Build conference, and this is the more, of course, I'm sure people recognize the names on this this slide, but basically these giant pharma companies are paying attention to this space and experimenting. And the last project to shout out is a company called Arc Institute, or a nonprofit called Arc Institute, where they're putting out a series of tools and a series of models that help with machine learning and machine learning related to biomedical tools. And so this is one model where it's not a model like O3, where you can chat with it, but it's a genomic model that is an expert at the DNA around eukaryotes, prokaryotes, and see if you have a specific question, or if an AI has a specific question around genomics, it's better to use a model like this than to use O3. So that was a quick survey of some of the state-of-the-art in the space. And what we're doing is we're taking parts of that and saying, what does it look like if a scientist is able to chat with these agents, but the scientist has a wallet? What if the agent has a wallet? What if the agent has a treasury? What if the agent can fund its own microproposals? And so these BioAgents are able to have even more capabilities and even more tools. Like these agents that we saw they're constrained to just chatting with the user, they're chatting with the scientist and helping them, but they aren't able to affect change in the greater world, which is what blockchain allows. So we're trying to say that we're pioneering agentic science over planetary scale compute. If you give a scientist one agent and is able to do things asynchronously, what's better than one agent is actually 2 agents. What's better than 2 agents is 10 agents. And so you can parallelize your thought processes and parallelize your task stream so that the scientist is able to remove more of the cognitive load and the burden of just being one person at one time, and you can set goals for longer. So this one term is like the throughput of thought is an interesting way to think about this, where more thought is happening in the world, that the more agents exist. And so I know I'm short on time, so basically this is just a synopsis of the the experimental method, where an agent can be an expert at one specific step of this, and we're starting with the initial steps and getting better at the ones at the bottom. But once you're good at one step, you can start to chain steps together, where a scientist can start with a hypothesis, the agent helps with experiment design, the agent helps with sending it to a cloud lab or in silico validation, and eventually it leads back into IP NFTs and molecule. So what I'd like you guys to think about today in hearing about different AIs and different projects is that what if the agent has a wallet? What if the agent has the ability to create a transaction or create an attestation, receive tokens, send tokens? And so that's what we're building with the BioAgent Launchpad, where scientists can add their own private data and their own knowledge to these AIs, which becomes the differentiating factor. Like, how is one AI different from another AI? Well, it's the private data that you add to it, the private prompting you give it. So like Ed Boyden might have many ideas that he hasn't yet shared with the world, but he could share it with his agent, and the agent is there to represent him in speaking with any scientist interested in his work. And yeah, I think that's it. We're building, there's multiple different AI agent frameworks. We're doing a workshop in actually just 1 hour after this in the other room. We're talking more about the actual code of how these are built. But they're pretty interesting, pretty complicated, and they have a lot going on, and there's a lot of room for them to grow. So I think I'm wrapping up here, and agentic science is a new field with increasing capabilities, and we're using open source frameworks to build bioagents that are producing high caliber knowledge work and building knowledge graphs on chain. And so with the Launchpad, anyone can fund a bioagent that is launched through Bio, and we'll scale the audience, the pupils, and the experimental results that a scientist can develop. And that's all. Thank you very much for being here in the morning.